Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we got a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery. Our first player today is NoisyElmo, playing as the Space Marine Apothecary. The Space Marine Apothecary is a healing commander, starts out mostly fighting as a melee hero, but not particularly strong in that respect. He's really more about healing and how that synergizes with the rest of his army. NoisyElmo's opponent is DJ Raffa, playing as a Word Bearer's Chaos Lord. The Chaos Lord is a tanky melee hero. He does, however, start out with that twin-linked bolter, which is decent for a starting ranged weapon, especially for a melee hero, and he can get an even better ranged weapon in the form of that combi flamer. Although you can, of course, choose to emphasize his melee dominance as well. So I am recording this cast. This is the first Beta 8 cast that I am recording, and I am recording it as Beta 9 has already been released. I've just fallen a little bit behind, and more than a little bit behind, in part because of other obligations, but there are a lot of great Beta 8 games floating around. It's a lot in my inbox, and a sudden influx even just on game replays, and a lot of that is courtesy of the new ranked ladder that has been sort of instituted, we'll say instituted, on basically in the Dawn of War Elite website. So a lot more 1v1 games are being played and recorded, and that's just creating a lot more good games. And I'm excited to cast them. I guess I'm going to have to go on a little bit of a casting binge to cover all of what I have been missing. But to this match, right now we see DJ Raffa playing as the Chaos Lord. DJ Raffa's a very good player, known a little bit more for, I think, his antics and being a little temperamental, but he's also a high-level player. I believe the Chaos Lord is his main, and he is one of the better Chaos Lord players around. Best Chaos Lord player these days, probably either Tiger or Toilali. Probably Toilali, even though Tiger's probably the best Chaos Lord main, but DJ Raffa is also very, very good. And, you know, I've been focusing just on this Chaos Lord chasing down that Apothecary. And it was interesting. Just the Apothecary was just running around. And he was running around not even fighting the Chaos Lord. And even if he tried fighting the Chaos Lord, that was a fight that he had no hope of winning. And, I mean, that's very interesting, just the fact that Noisy was doing that, running that Apothecary around, letting the Chaos Lord chase him even when he was not going to win that. And he was kind of just, I think, distracting DJ Raffa. And, I mean, maybe as a consequence, we saw a Heretic Squad go down there for DJ Raffa, maybe just taxing DJ Raffa's micro, a distraction tactic from Noisy. And Noisy probably has the better micro between these two players. Probably also has the better gameplay smarts, but I mean, just what we saw there was almost unexpected, and I feel like most players would not do that. They would not run their hero around, let them get chased and take damage from a unit that they have no chance of winning against, and then just retreat them out of there. But I think part of what works there is that keeps the Chaos Lord busy. It keeps him doing something against a unit that he's not actually going to do any permanent damage to, because he can't bleed the Apothecary. And even if he somehow managed to kill the Apothecary, which is actually very highly unlikely in Tier 1, losing the Apothecary is comparatively less of an issue than losing any other commander in the game in 1v1, because you do have that Laraman's Blessing global that you can use to revive your hero without spending requisition. Now, this is very bad positioning for the scouts. We might see some Doomblast right there. We actually didn't see some Doomblast right there. Oh, and we see a grenade launcher upgrade right after that, so that's a little surprising. Considering the health that these scouts have left, a Doomblast probably would have actually wiped that scout squad, so a bit of a missed opportunity there from Raffa. I don't know if he doesn't know or if he just missed that opportunity. Either one is possible. I would more expect that he just missed the opportunity. Doomblast is, for some reason, very, very good at killing retreating units, which is, it's again something that I don't quite understand why. The Doomblast does plasma damage, which is not something I typically, has not something that has been like in common knowledge as a damage type that is good on retreat. At least when it is on ranged weapons, it's typically not. But maybe it just works on retreat because it's an area of effect attack and it's just hitting every single model in retreat. But we see Noisy here with his typical long Tier 1 The way, like, I would normally describe it in terms of what specific units he got, but someone even kind of implicitly pointed out that he kind of does this with every race that he plays. He does it with the Imperial Guard, he does it with Chaos. So it is actually getting 3 of the starting squad, in this case Scouts, one of the other non-power squads, in this case the TACs, and then he gets the suppression team.
We have lost a building to the enemy.
Now for Noisy's case, and that kind of gives him different things in all of the matchups. Even though he does this he does it with Imperial Guard, he does it with Chaos, and he does it with Space Marines, and he gets something different out of all of those. In this case, he's obviously going to get map control, because he does have Scouts. Scouts are very good for controlling the map. In part, it's not, and you know, part of it is because of their speed, because they are cheap and you can put out more Scouts on the field and they can then capture. But one of the almost lesser, I think one of the lesser known or lesser understood reasons for why Scouts are so good for map control is because of the fact that it hurts less to not have them in the main engagement, compared to something like if you're playing as Chaos. You more often want that extra heretic squad in the actual engagement because of what it does in that engagement. That's less true for the Scouts. They don't contribute. There are definitely times when I feel that Scouts can actually contribute more to, basically just contribute more to your game by capping rather than fighting. Especially a completely unupgraded Scout squad usually is, to be honest, contributing more by capping than actually fighting. Now, in the case of this particular matchup, usually I actually think the triple scout builds can actually work out pretty nicely against Chaos. And the reason that is because, in part because Chaos has less range DPS coming out of their starting units. And they just have a less, generally have a less ranged heavy opening than most of the other races in the game. That is, Chaos. And one of the weaknesses of Scouts is that they tend to lose in a direct fight against most starting ranged units. They'll lose directly to Tactical Marines, to Chaos Space Marines, to Banshees, even, I believe, yeah, even definitely to upgrade it to Guardsmen with a Sergeant. So what works is that they're very good for kiting and focus firing down melee units, melee heroes, as well as melee squads. So they can be very good against melee heretics, a hero like the Chaos Lord, unless he gets the Combi Flamer, as well as... we'll leave it at that. Now, in this particular case, I actually feel like Raffa, actually quite amazingly, is actually doing pretty well to counter the triple scout build. In part because he got a grenade launcher grenade launchers on one of his heretics. He does have one Chaos Space Marine as well as his Havoc. So the scouts actually are going to focus mostly on map control, or in this case, Noisy actually did upgrade 2 of his scout squads to have grenades, and we have been seeing him do some of those retreat kill attempts with grenades. Now, we already have this Blood Crusher out on the field while I'm still talking about scouts. And if we notice, Raffa has a Blood Crusher out, while Noisy is still in Tier 1. Even though Noisy was winning on map control, he had Raffa pushed all the way back to his base, and the only reason Raffa actually got out was actually because of this Blood Crusher. Now, with the way Noisy plays, where he gets the triple starting unit into the second basic unit, it's a very wreck-heavy opening. He's spending all this wreck on all of these squads, including the Tactical Marines, before even putting down his first generator. Now, I didn't pay attention to the generators at the start, but Raffa did just have his power down earlier. He had a full farm down earlier, and in fact, he just had, well, I was going to say he has more power down, period, but with the map control that Noisy has, he also has noted the side power nodes. Raffa also went for, of course, he did not go for like the Noisy long Tier 1. He just went for more traditional 4-squad Tier 1. So he put down his power faster, got to Tier 2 faster, and then he ended up getting that Blood Crusher to sort of basically just kind of turn the tables, pressure with that vehicle that forces Noisy to get some kind of anti-vehicle. And at the time when the Blood Crusher first came out, the only thing that could even damage that Blood Crusher was this Devastator Marine Squad, which did have advanced targeting. Definitely not an optimal choice for taking on a Blood Crusher. but it was at least something, and he does have tactical marines as well with the missile launcher. Now, he is not playing... The Apothecary is unique among the Space Marine heroes in that he has literally no AV whatsoever. Definitely one of the disadvantages of the Apothecary compared to the Tech Marine and the Force Commander, especially with the incredibly powerful AV coming out of those heroes, and particularly the Force Commander for dealing with a unit like the Blood Crusher. And he also didn't get Assault Space Marines, and I think a lot of the emergency AAV that is so powerful for Space Marines kind of has the... It's based a lot on the combo of the interaction between... You have the Assault Space Marines, which you can get the snare from the Melta Bomb, you can get the ranged AV with the missile launcher on the Tactical Marine, and then you can get Hero AV if you're playing the Tech Marine or the Force Commander. So just that, what's so strong about the Space Marine opening is that you can get AV upgrades on core units, and that's going to be at a relatively low cost. Relatively low cost because the power is definitely substantial, especially for the missile launcher. However, it's very, very cheap on rec to get the AV, the Space Marine AV that we have here, because a missile launcher is going to be just very cheap on rec compared to, say, for DJ Raffa, since Chaos does not have that as much. The only unit, the only core Tier 1 squad they have that can be upgraded to AV from Tier 1 is the Havoc. But the Chaos Space Marines cannot, the Raptors, which DJ Raffa hasn't even gotten, cannot, and that's also part of the reason why Raptors tend to be somewhat of a less... One of the reasons why Raptors tend to be a less common upgrade than Assault Space Marines. Because Assault Space Marines help you with that transition to Tier 2 and having to deal with vehicles, while Raptors actually kind of hurt you. And in fact, Raffa doesn't even have much real AV, and this is... Well, he does have the Havoc. Let me take that back. He does have the Havoc. I forgot that. Does have to be very, very careful with this grenade throw. Tries to retreat out of there, but he actually gets the Havoc squad gets wiped entirely, and now that puts Raffa in a position where he doesn't have much AV aside from his Blood Crusher. And Chaos is just frequently in that position where they often rely on their own vehicles as AV. But Raffa lacks a snare. He also lacks ranged AV. And for the Blood Crusher, it actually, obviously, as a melee unit, it needs to get close to actually damage the Razorback. And that makes it much easier to overextend than something like a Razorback. Right here we do have the missile launcher. The missile attack actually shot at something else entirely. I guess maybe took a shot at the Chaos Lord. The Chaos Lord did go down for Raffa. And Raffa also lost a Heretic squad. So Raffa taking some losses right here. And I feel his composition, at least right now, it's just not strong for what he has to deal with. And the best he could do, I think, was... I mean, let me take that back too, because I mean there are certainly ways in which things could go in his favor, but I think the more reasonable expectation is that he would have to kind of tread water until he gets something to give him the edge, just because he's just at a bit of a disadvantage with there being a ranged source of AV against his vehicle, against his melee vehicle, whereas he does not have any ranged AV against Noisy's vehicle. He is, however, getting a Plague Marine squad. And Plague Marines are just a very interesting unit. And again, I was talking about how cheaply you can get out this Tactical Marine missile launcher. And there was, at some point, a discussion. This was a topic, a thread on the forums that I wanted to respond to at some point, but I just didn't take the time because I tend to spend a lot more time when I'm trying to write things than when I'm trying to talk, because I just do way too much editing. But before I talk about that, I like the positioning of this Havoc, of this Devastator, with advanced targeting as a way of scaring off that Blood Crusher, because Noisy perhaps knew that for Raffa to really make a push for that Razorback, and to try to actually get that Razorback dead, he really needs to combine the Plague Marines with the Blood Crusher. He needs to get the snare from the Plague Marines, and then he needs to get the higher damage from the Blood Crusher. Because the Plague Marines, as a source of AV, although they have their snare and they are a ranged source of AV that doesn't even need to set up, which are all very good things, they do pretty low damage, and I believe it's actually lower than the Tactical Marine DPS. and this is something I'm not sure about, in part because it was something that was actually never completely clear, because whenever I always check data sources, like the Dawn of War wiki or the Dawn of War Codex website, there were often inconsistencies. So, but the general impression I got is that Plague Marines actually do less damage as AV just because they take so long to reload. Their fire rate is so slow with the missile. They do, of course, do good burst damage. But by themselves, Plague Marines are typically not enough to take out a Razorback. The Razorback can get repair, it can also use its grenade, and it will typically just tank the damage from a Plague Marine squad, while the Plague Marine, even as Plague Marines as tough as they are, will actually just get whittled down and start dying and bleeding models, and you don't want to bleed too many Plague Marine models. But man, I wanted to talk about the comparison between the Tactical Marine and the Plague Marine, and there was definitely at some point when someone was trying to compare the Tactical Marine versus the Plague Marines, as basically trying to make an argument for Plague Marines being better because of the fact that basically that they better period, and I think also better for their costs. But we got Bloodletters jumping in right here and actually wipe out the Devastators, which is really, really good, especially considering the ridiculous DPS coming out of Bloodletters' power melee DPS. So Raffa's having a good engagement this time, taking out the Devastator Marine squad, and I think that's actually going to be a big win for him. And also, well, he's going to take out the Apothecary, but that's not going to be as big of a win, since Noisy is at the point where he could just straight up get the Apothecary back. Raffa also very unnecessarily lost too many Chaos Space Marine models, including an Aspiring Champion right there. I think because he wanted to force off this Tactical Marine squad. But man, Plague Marines compared to Tacs. Alright, let's try to make this a little quicker. Someone is basically just trying to say that Plague Marines are better than Missile Launcher Tactical Marines for their costs. The problem I have with that comparison is not which unit is better or not, but the fact that Tactical Marines are typically a unit that you already have in your roster from Tier 1, and then you're upgrading cheaply, or at least cheaply on rec, to get the Missile Launcher. Whereas Plague Marines are a unit that you have to get in Tier 2, you get them, they're fairly expensive on rec, and it just hurts your composition a lot more. It has, or maybe we'll just say it has more, it's a bigger compositional decision, because you just already have the Tactical Marines usually, whereas so you're not changing your composition that much really when you get a Missile Tac squad, whereas you definitely are when you get a Plague Marine squad. Now this will probably be the end of the Razorback. We have the Blood Crusher making a push right here. Blood Crusher making a push, and it will probably take out the Razorback, but it will also probably die as well, since we now have a Space Marine Predator, as well as some Chaos Terminators. And I mean, both the Blood Crusher and the Chaos Terminators could actually just chase this Razorback into base. And I think we'll get finishes off that Razorback, but I don't know. I'm wondering if we'll actually have the Blood Crusher get out of here alive, just based on, well, the Missile Tac is still right here. Chaos Terminators are going to go for Force Melee, and that's definitely going to be a winning fight for them, even at relatively low health. But there's also just something about, we have these Chaos Terminators right here, right now. And Chaos Terminators, it's not something that Chaos players get every game. And they're not necessarily a go-to choice, but at the same time, they can be extremely, extremely good for so many reasons. In part, they actually do solve a lot of issues that Chaos kind of has. In part, one is the relative lack for Chaos, the relative lack of general purpose units that also do AV, as opposed to something like a Plague Marine squad, which is really more of a specialist unit. These Chaos Terminators, still very, very good, even if they get an autocannon, are still going to be not still very, very good. They just are straight up very, very good against infantry of all types, except for maybe other super heavy infantry, but even against that, they're decent. But especially still good against heavy infantry and regular infantry with the range DPS they put out, as well as being a very, very viable source of AV against actual vehicles like Predators. And that just kind of gets Chaos slightly out of either, again, not having AV on core units, not having AV on units that can't also fight infantry, or Chaos relying heavily on vehicles to act as their AV. So relying on vehicles for their own AV, which has its own set of issues, just in terms of generally Chaos still having less AV. But right now, Raffa actually having quite a bit. And I'm also very impressed with Raffa still keeping this Blood Crusher alive at level 2. Blood Crusher, usually a very time-critical purchase that is almost not even expected to stay alive throughout the course of a game. To be honest, not even expected to make it to tier 3, let alone be at level 2, and still be kept alive and be kept viable against 2 tanks. But we have 1 Predator down already, although at the same time, the positioning of these Cast Terminators is pretty precarious right here. Having just burned their teleport, they kind of did a lateral teleport instead of a backwards teleport, and that's also very dangerous for them. And right now here they're kind of chasing, and they can put some pressure on the Predator, but at the same time, this is also a dangerous game for them because they're at very, very low health, and without some support, that could actually be really, really bad for the Cast Terminators. And I also think it's very, very smart right now. DJ Raffa kind of realizing what a precarious situation he was in, and now NoisyElmo also realizing what a precarious situation that DJ Raffa's in and trying to capitalize on this, and he'll probably take out this Terminator. I think 1 more cannon shot and then just a few more sponson shots, but he's actually, wow, he's actually kind of drawing the fire of the autocannon with those Chaos Space Marines, and actually keeps the Chaos Predator alive, which is, I mean, the Chaos Terminator's alive, which is that could have and almost should have been a dead squad of Chaos Terminators. So, I almost think it was both impressive and yet at the same time a combination of luck. But Raffa's now looking pretty good in terms of his army. He just has a bigger army, and Noisy has lost a few squads. He lost Devastators. He lost Tactical Marines. No, he replaced them for Stern Guard veterans, which, if anything, is a little surprising. But Noisy did still definitely lose some things, and he just has a smaller army. He does, of course, have a Predator, which is just a very versatile unit. Right now, he doesn't have it upgraded to anything, but he might be saving his resources for something else, especially because he's a little low on units. Raffa, meanwhile, certainly Raffa's looking strong in many ways, but he's also having some challenges of his own. First of all, he's got 2... No, never mind. He's got a squad of Terminators. He doesn't have a whole lot of resources, and he wants to reinforce these Terminators before they get back out on the field. And as of right now, he's just short of the power he needs to do that. So his Terminators are in base, and he's running around a little bit blobs up, in part because I think Chaos does need to blob up a little bit more. He's relying a lot on these heretics for worship to support both the Bloodletters and the Blood Crusher, as well as even just to support the Plague Marines and the Chaos Space Marines with speed. But I mean, as a result, Noisy is actually taking back the map tremendously. About to have a triple cap in DJ Raffa, despite having a lot of victories in the past few engagements. Kind of finding himself against the ropes in terms of VPs, as well as map control. So he's starting to push right now, waiting on his Chaos Terminators. And, I think that might be a well-advised choice. He actually waited until he could reinforce his Terminators to full, rather than either going out there without the Terminators or going out there with Terminators under strength. And he does still have the time, even though he is definitely at a significant VP deficit. But it allows him to come back out at relatively full strength. He still has not bought his Chaos Lord back, although, I mean, if we look at his Chaos Lord, is level 2, and probably doesn't have much, if any, war gear. He might not actually be doing a whole lot with the Chaos Lord, but he's doing a lot of very, very proficient Chaos play, showing definitely a lot of understanding of Chaos, I'd say even prior to Elite Mod. Because he's definitely doing what are a lot of... I mean, I hate to say retail strategies. To some extent they are. But I mean, to some extent they're just chaos metagame strategies. Although I'd definitely say the emphasis on Bloodletters, basically the emphasis on demon play, was definitely emphasized a lot more pre-retail. In particular, I think Bloodletters have definitely... I want to do like a little bit of a play on words. They have phased out a little bit out of basically the Elite meta or the Dawn of War Retribution meta. I think in part because of just the transition that Chaos has to make for AV, needing AV and bloodletters from the course of retail to Elite, going from being arguably the best thing for that to being probably the worst thing for it. Oh, wow, that was a very, very brazen teleport, but I think that's actually going to be the end of this Predator right here. Taking, I guess, missile shots from the Plague Marines, and now just taking both force melee and autocannon shots. And I mean, again, these Terminators really are proving themselves in that anti-vehicle role, and proving themselves in that anti-vehicle role, really that anti-all role. And here we actually have an orbital bombardment, and I don't know, let's see how well Raffa can get out of this. But Noisy now actually looking really, really thin. But at the same time, he just took out the Blood Crusher. This orbital bombardment might even help him out a bit. Definitely, Raffa's now bleeding a lot from the Plague Marines, and this time he definitely is going to lose the Chaos Terminators. No way they can survive out of that. But I think they kind of did. The Chaos Terminators, it's weird to say that, like, losing Chaos Terminators is justified, but, I mean, they took out 2 Predators. So, at least, for the time that they were there, they certainly at least, Raffa at least got his money's worth out of his original spot of Chaos Terminators, and now he's got a new one. But Noisy looking thin, and yet he does still have a significant VP lead and is actually about to get a decap to even out the VPs, and he's still just got a lot of VPs. Raffa still choosing not to get his Chaos Lord back, instead choosing to get more Chaos Terminators. This time he does not have the autocannon, he does not have the resources to get the autocannon for it. And I actually see him reinforcing his Plague Marines, and I would actually say it's tough. Because I would personally say don't reinforce the Plague Marines, or at least don't reinforce them all the way, because they are pretty expensive for how relatively little each Plague Marine model does in terms of damage output. But, I mean, then the thing is that Raffa has actually been taking a lot of damage, so he might need that to basically continue to use his Plague Marines in the way that he has, which is they've been soaking up a lot of damage. Now, NoisyElmo, he's low on squads, and he's just going with the tank spam. I believe this is his 4th Predator. This one does not have the autocannon, so he lost the one with the autocannon before. And now Raffa, I mean, Raffa looking strong in a lot of ways, but he's also really running out of time in terms of VPs. Here we go with that speed worship, and I don't know if Raffa saw those scouts. I mean, these scouts are interestingly doing nothing, and yet they seem to be drawing Raffa's attention. And Raffa can't really, I guess at this point he really needs his attention on these VPs. He also has pretty much for a while given up on getting these side power nodes, and that could be having pretty serious implications. I mean, as we can see, Noisy has already put out 4 Predators. And that takes power. I mean, I definitely have said before, and I think people say and definitely think, that power gets less influential as the game goes on, and to an extent that is true, because you need to get power to a certain point to get to tech up. But clearly it's still not completely irrelevant in the late game, even if it's not as influential. And I mean, just Noisy pumping out these Predators. Predators, as much as they are a fantastic value, and just good in so many ways for everything that they do, for being such a general purpose unit. They are not cheap on power. I'd say cheap on wreck for what they do, but definitely not cheap on power. Especially not when you're pouring in some of the upgrades. Then they become very, very expensive on power. And I mean, again, they do a lot for. But now Raffa's pushing forward with his Terminators when they don't actually have that autocannon, so they're a lot less effective as AV with that autocannon. He's going to be relying entirely on force melee, and that can still definitely do damage. It can still do some work, especially in combination with a snare, but they're still getting kited and still taking a ton of damage. And now Raffa's pushing to try to get kills on vehicles while Noisy's playing the capping game, and Noisy has the double cap again. and grenade, and Raffa just walks into it. And you know, this is at the point in the game where, I mean, as much as Raffa's had a lot of good plays, he's done a lot of great things, but NoisyElmo is starting to outplay him in a lot of ways, definitely in terms of micro, and I think also just in terms of prioritizing what's important at this point in the game. Although Noisy also, one thing that he is struggling with is that he started with 3 scout squads, and one of the great things about getting basically just getting a multi-scout opening, or anytime you want to get multiple of the starting squad, is that it really sets you up very well for making vehicle-heavy plays, which is what Noisy did. He got multiple Predators, yet he hasn't even really had the repair support for it. He only has one scout squad that can repair, although they are level 4 scouts with 1,000 health. And right here we also see the Apothecary keeping the Terminators busy, and that's a very interesting fight, and he actually gets out of there alive, which is pretty amazing. A leveled Apothecary fighting the Terminators, and that is, again, a fight that the Apothecary was never going to win, and yet Noisy chose to fight it out. Now, again, it was a fight that the Apothecary is never going to win, and yet I feel it was a smart choice, because again, it keeps the Terminators busy in a fight where they're not going to do any permanent damage, and where they're spending time fighting the Apothecary when they could be doing something more valuable, like trying to kill a Predator, bleeding Stern Guard models, bleeding Scout models, or even capping, which is, yes, more important than fighting the Apothecary. And again, without doing any permanent damage to the Apothecary, he got out of there alive. I mean, he took up probably like something like 20 seconds of game time. Took up 20 seconds of the game time for the cast Terminators. And even if the Apothecary did die, Noisy had the red that he could have used Lariman's Blessing. Right now you don't see it because he got Terminators of his own, but he had the red to actually get his Apothecary back if he lost that fight against the... If his Apothecary... Well, I mean, not if his Apothecary lost that fight, because he was going to lose that fight, but if the Apothecary died from that, or got incapacitated or whatever. But at this point, this is Raffa's final push. It's do it now, do or die. And he's pushing, and he's moving in. And for some reason, Noisy is actually backing off. Now, again, Raffa chose to get a Predator of his own, sort of as a way of dealing with vehicles. But he's in a bit of a difficult position, I think, with 2 Predators on the other team. They have extra armor, and this one also has 3 levels. So it has a lot more health than this Cast Predator. The Cast Predator does have the Mark of Khorne, so it will have increased autocannon damage. It will actually do more damage than the non-las cannon Space Marine Predators, but now they are getting las cannons. But I mean, even without the las cannons, Noisy doesn't even necessarily need these las cannons, but you know, they're going to help him very decisively take out this Predator. And just allow him to very quickly take out the Predator, and then he can back off before the Plague Marines can really do anything significant. So probably very soon, once this Predator gets a few more repairs, he's going to move in. I was actually expecting him to move in from 2 different sides, and I also like that he's kind of drawing the fire with his Tactical Marines and his Terminators. And wow, Raffa even kind of path blocks his own Predator with his squads. And, I mean, at this point, this is not looking good for Raffa. He's still here, still fighting, but he's retreating everything. Only the Chaos Lord is left. The Chaos Lord was revived, but hasn't actually done much this whole game. Knocks over the Apothecary, but, I mean, we got all these units right here at full health, doing damage, and Raffa actually calls a GG. Basically just knowing that he's going to lose this engagement. Once he loses the engagement, Noisy's going to capture the middle VP, and that's going to be game in favor of Noisy. Alright, and that's pretty much it. Raffa just letting some of his units die.
Go ahead, ready. You're ready to serve.
Ready for duty.
Ready to serve. Go ahead. Reading you clear and true. Ready to serve. Resource location spotted. Go ahead. Reading you clear and true. Purification vials on the ceasing rearmament.
Behold target sun.
And the game is actually still going. I guess just gonna let those VPs go down. Just want to let a little more fighting go on.
Let our enemies beware, for victory is ours.
All right. I actually thought that was an epic game. I really enjoyed it. There's so many 1v1 games out that I'm really excited to watch and cast. I'm going to try to go on a little bit of a casting binge, especially now that I'm going to have a little bit more time. Hope you enjoyed it, and have a good night.